'tis many's a gay night, from dark till daylight, I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.
Very happy Easter to you if you've just joined us on Sweet Omagh Town, and we hope to talk to Mr Declan Ford.
Well, I'm here listening and taking all in and wishing everybody a happy Easter.
Indeed.
Donald, how are things?
Very well, considering very well. Easter
We're grand. Look, we'll plough through it.
No
point in getting down about this. We'll just,
No.
Plough on.
And, as I say, don't be afraid, because I think fear weakens your immune system. I think you got to stay positive and stay safe and just see that there will be an end to this, And, people are disappointed, and, people who would normally like to get to church at Easter and things and feel they've been, robbed. But I think, the God I believe in is out and about in the community and helping people and in the hospitals, and you'll see him anywhere, I think, if you look for him. There was a young lad I saw the other day cleaning the wheels in the trolleys for one of the supermarkets here in the town. I can tell you, I don't know who trained him for it, but I tell you, you could use it in an operating theatre when he was finished with this young lad. He was masked up and had all the gown and all the sprays and all going, and every trolley was spick and span. Goodness. And I thought to myself, that guy is a credit to whoever employed him. He's a young student who I know him from the town here.
Well, that's very, very good. Good.
That to me is what is just as important, to help and do in any way. Excuse me. How may I serve? I suppose is what people should be thinking about in the stage, and we are very grateful for the amount of people that do answer the call and say, "How may I serve?" It's wonderful.
Well, exactly. And I would hope that all the goodwill that comes out with people clapping every Thursday at 8:00. The politicians here and actually then start thinking, maybe we need to start kind of recognising the good and the not the good work, the great work and the essential work that the people who work in the health service do. So, less of the platitudes and more of the gratitude.
Absolutely. Speaking of hospitals, Declan, I'm of a mind, as you would say, to play an interview that you and I recorded many years ago. I would say maybe mid to late 90s.
That's
with
right.
Two male nurses from the Tyrone and Fermanagh Hospital. One was a Peter Kelly, sadly has gone, and Brian Mullan.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I do indeed. It was exceptional. When I think of their descriptions of their terror of going into the place initially, and the way that dissolved into affection and love and sadness when they left, after so many years working there, and it was, I think, what, a true vocation is, because they just absolutely loved the work. And it was hard, it was difficult, but the way they talked, it left an indelible mark on me, because they just absolutely loved the patients, loved the work, no matter how trying and hard it was. And they were exceptional people.
Peter Kelly, I remember saying that it was a very formidable place when he went there, because there was a high wall around the building and had gates and like a gravel driveway. I can imagine that old Gothic style building must have been very intimidating for that. But it was a true asylum, Declan, wasn't it, when you think of it, of its time, and in the sense of an asylum, was it was a place of safety for a lot of people.
Well, that's it. Of course it was, but it almost was there was a kind of like a prison-like appearance to it.
Yes, and had it run like a prison, but was it like a
regime?
Oh
yeah, and that was on the surface, but what I think what Peter and Brian brought out was it wasn't that inside. It was more. It was almost like a family, and they were very much part of that. And when they talked, I think they gave this sense of just affection for the people who are there, you know,
Yes.
and that's what I remember, you know, thinking back now, all those 20 odd years, you know, they were remarkable people.
And a major employer in town, you think of the number of staff that they would have employed, nurses and...
Oh, yeah. It was a separate entity.
It was.
From the town, you know, it was removed. I mean, I remember we used to live many, many years ago in Knoxilla Park, and you went up maybe as far as Knockgreenan, and that was the extent of it. And then beyond that was the TNF.
Mm-hmm.
And in your head was still the Asylum, you know, that you almost like a forbidden place to go to, you know, and how that changed, you know, over the years, and perception changed. And of course, when Maggie Thatcher came along, the whole idea of, you know, it eventually came into, you know, take the patients out, put them into the community. And I think that eroded what the TNF did. And then, of course, it was taken over then by the integrated. And it must have been very strange for students in the integrated school to get into the TNF, to be educated.
Yeah, true enough. And so many people from Fermanagh will refer to the TNF as Omagh. So-and-so, he's down in Omagh, you know.
Oh, right.
I always said that. I've often been told that, you know, that he's in Omagh. Omagh was enough just to say in Fermanagh. You're sort of condemned to the asylum, I suppose. But
it's actually quite reminiscent of. I remember my wife's grandfather, who died in his 90s, and he talked about the Faverley Hospital in Omagh. The Faverley Hospital. It was the fever hospital, which I presume was the old
the old workhouse. Yeah, would have been out by the General Hospital.
But to him it was the Faverley Hospital.
Yeah. Well,
my goodness.
Marshall would have defended his use there, I'm saying.
That's right. You know, and well, I'm looking forward to hearing the interview. I haven't heard it in many, many years.
Well, it runs for about 30 or 40 minutes now. It's going to be one of two interviews. Do you remember Mr McKinley we interviewed sometime?
I do indeed. He was more involved in the administration.
Uh-huh.
And I think his you know, attitude, for want of a better word, towards the TNF would have a different twist, in that where Brian and Peter were involved on the wards, he was very much involved on the I suppose the overseeing of the hospital. And I think that would be a lovely kind of counterbalance.
Yes.
To Brian and Peter's memories.
These memories will be of the emotional side of nursing and running a hospital like that, and we have some photographs hopefully to go with it as well of some of the nursing staff. So without further ado, Declan, we shall sit back and listen to the Tyrone and Fermanagh Hospital, courtesy of the late Peter Kelly and Brian Mullan. And till we meet again, Mr. Ford, have a good day.
Good day.
Yeah, there was a eccentric and strange behaviour, and somebody had said to me, would you go out and give them people a hand out there with that hay? I would have been out like a shot, but you know, that nervousness and that you gradually became used to it, and it was a great life. You know, it was a very fulfilling and satisfying, and I met some great people, both staff and patients, over 36 years, and I learned a lot from both.
About a mile from the heart of Omagh, sited on the edge of the Camoan River, stands a Grade A listed building, the Tyrone and Fermanagh Hospital, known locally as the T&F. Since the mid-19th century, this purpose-built hospital complex was, in every sense of the word, an asylum. Although a major employer, the people of this county town have been ambivalent in their attitudes towards the presence of such a large-scale psychiatric hospital in their midst. This building is now redundant and almost obsolete, and yet for over 150 years it has provided a home, care and shelter for the more vulnerable individuals in society. In this programme, two retired nurses, Peter Kelly and Brian Mullan, take us behind the forbidding exterior of the grey stone Victorian facade and reveal the care and protection and humanity within.
The thing that I noticed most about it when I went there in 1957, when I went there in 57 and Brian 3 years later, that most people coming to work there came on bicycles. And there was the great big gates on, and there was the high walls down the side of the bare road. And people were all cycling into work in the mornings and cycling out again in the evening. You see all these bicycles at 7:30 heading down the road towards Omagh. But at that time also, the front of the place, the front of the main building wasn't even tarmacked, it was gravel. But the thing I noticed about it when I went there first was the lovely satin, the nice Victorian type building with the lovely trees, some great trees to the front of it. Rhododendrons, there was different oak trees and different types of trees, chestnut trees, and the staff's children used to come in to gather chestnuts in the evening. And the other thing I remember about it was that there was a gate lodge. There was a gate lodge just as you went into the main gate where the telephones were operated from.
That gate lodge, I remember, whenever I started work in 1960, I was told that I was given keys after a couple of days there, and I was told now the normal thing is if you lose these keys, or the rule was if you lost these keys, you lost your job.
The Tyrone Fermanagh Hospital was built in 1847, commenced in 1847, and according to the records, the first patients were admitted to it in 1851. And at that particular time, it was just that main block that still stands there today was on that site. But as time went on, there was extensions. There were extensions built mostly to the back of it, like laundry and kitchen and a recreation hall. And then there was also an RC church built and a Protestant church built. And there was also an annex built, which I believe was used in later years as a fever hospital. And I myself had an aunt who went there to nurse in 1915, and she told me of what life was like within the at that time it was known as Omagh Lunatic Asylum. And well, actually it had been after 1851 been known as Omagh Lunatic Asylum, and in the early when she went there around 1915, it was known as Omagh Mental Hospital.
And was she a nurse?
And she was a nurse that worked there, but she told me that at that time that there was very little paid help employed, that nurses and patients would have worked in the kitchen, nurses and patients would have worked in the laundry, and patients would have done most of the cleaning, the sweeping. It was primitive type of cleaning. There was no vacuum cleaners in those days, and the sweeping and all would have been done by the patients and the staff. And the staff, there was no such thing as a nurse's home in those days. There was rooms off wards where different members of staff would have slept during the night. And when they went there first to work, they would have had only maybe say a day off every 3 weeks, and they weren't given a key. Every place was locked. These people had come in and they weren't to be let out again, and every place was kept locked, so you weren't trusted with the key maybe for anything from up to 3 months until you proved that you were reliable before being given a key.
Well, Peter, you'd have had a family connection in that your aunt was there, but what about yourself, Brian? Had you any family connection with the TNF?
Well, it's funny I had. I just had left school, and I was, I suppose, parents were thinking, what's this fella going to do? And in 1959, I did an entrance exam. That was the criteria you did. It was English. You had to write a composition, do a few sums, problems at the set. That was it. There was 2 parts, English and the mathematical problems, and they weren't that difficult. But and I waited a year I was told that I passed the exam, and I went back home and worked with my father at home on the farm until the call came. And whenever I remember riding the bike out to the mental hospital, as it was known locally, but arrived out for work, and it was a strange place for for a young fella to arrive. It was. I mean, I didn't want to stay at all for the first 12 months, but it was, as Peter said earlier, it was a vibrant community that had its accommodation. It might have been Spartan and basic, but it was clean and warm, and it had its occupation. There was a farm, and there was laundry work, and there was people employed, patients employed, and all the activities of daily living that were needed to keep a community going. And people got up, and it was like people in normal life getting up and getting ready to go to their work. They knew everybody knew their own program for the day, and they went. And there was a shop, there was places of worship, as Peter's mentioned already, and there was entertainment. So it was a self-contained community. Maybe for nice some people a wee bit too self-contained, you know.
But it must have been very forbidden. You were the first time you went through the gates with the two of you to.
Oh my God! Experience. I didn't want to be there at all.
When I went there in 1957, you didn't have to have any particular number of O levels. And then at the end of 3 years, you sat the state examination, and it was in two parts. There was a written part, and there was an oral part. And the written part could have been in Derry, or it could have been at the Tyrone and Fermanagh Hospital, and the oral part was mainly at some of the Belfast hospitals. But it didn't have to be a psychiatric hospital. You done your, it could have been I done mine at Belfast City Hospital.
I'll never forget whenever very shortly after I started to work in the Tyrone and Fermanagh, one of the duties of the most junior member of staff was to go down to the mortuary. It's long since been tossed. Even the new mortuary is gone. It's down where the nurses' home is now. It was down where the nurses' home is now. But sometimes the removal would be late in the evening, and on a quiet autumn or winter's evening, you'd have to go down with the undertaker to release the remains. And the gate lodge, they came up past the gate lodge now, and the gate lodge was kept a register where the removal of the remains had to be registered. And the undertaker had to sign it, and it was in a big locked box, this register. So you collected the keys on the way down for the mortuary and the gate lodge, went in and assisted the undertaker to remove the body, and the undertaker would stop at the gate lodge and go in and sign this. I would have the key with me. It was attached to the key of the morgue. But I remember releasing the body, and the undertaker, I recognised the hearse had been there before, and I omitted, or was too junior to mention, to stopping at the gate lodge to sign the register. And he left, the hearse and the car that was with it left, and I had to push the trolley back in, arrange the morgue, and leave it as I found it, and lock up. By the time I got that done and got up to the gate lodge, he was out on the road, heading down towards the crossroads. I said, what the hell am I going to do now? And I had to very timidly approach the chief male nurse, but I knew there was something wrong when he jumped up on the desk and says, it's not the rules of the hospital you've broken here, it's the law of the bloody land. He says, what kind of an ignoramus are you? And he eventually told me to get out of his sight and chased me back to the ward. And I was telling it when I went back to the ward again, and I wasn't getting much sympathy from them. They wanted to hear the gory details, except one man. And he says, don't worry about it. He says, I'm not be worried about this time tomorrow evening. I thought I got the sack and didn't know about it. So it was right. They made some arrangements. I at least had got the name of the undertaker, and they sent the register to the undertaker and got it signed up, and there wasn't another word about it. The year I started in 1960, the number of patients peaked that year. It was over 1,100 patients in it at that stage. And by this time, of course, it was taking all people with mental health problems from Fermanagh as well as Tyrone. So from the southernmost point in Fermanagh to the most northerly point of Tyrone, anybody who needed admission to hospital came to the Tyrone and Fermanagh. And it was, in my view, and as I saw it over the years, a big place. There was plenty of food about it. The heat was good. The conditions improved year on year from ever I started. Wards were large dormitory, barrack-type rooms, which are not acceptable nowadays, with rows of beds and iron frame beds at that. The walls had been brick, but they'd been painted over, and some of them papered over to modernise them, to make them a bit more domesticated. The chief male nurse was the head of the male nursing staff. He was responsible for, I don't know at the time, maybe 100 nursing staff, male nursing staff. And the midrun, she was in charge of the female nursing staff. Probably another 100 nursing staff at that time. I mean, that it increased a hell of a lot after that. There was a total of 500 nursing staff, male and female, following that later on in the mid-60s, or towards the end of the 60s. But they, having mentioned the chief male nurse and the matron, they were the head of the nursing staff. They were almost responsible. One half of the hospital was for the male patients, and the other half of the hospital was for the female. Now it was a wee bit like a convent and a monastery, that there was barriers which you shall not cross, so that if a male nurse or a man, apart from the medical staff, wanted to go up to the female side, they were met at the centre of the building and escorted, maintenance men and the like of that. So it was very institutional in that sense. It was very protective and custodial in that sense, that they weren't allowed to mix. That changed as years went on to a more natural environment where they would interact at church on Sunday or at recreational activities. But apart from that,
what about meal times?
No, the separate dining halls, isn't that right? Separate dining halls and separate, or at least very definitely it's different times for dining. But now, when you mention dining halls, the bottom floor, certainly in my memory of the male side, and as Peter said earlier, there was wards with 70 and 80 patients, and there was a time. Everybody had a time for coming down to the dining hall to dine, and that place was alive. It was like an anthill, and there was a system developed. I suppose if the authorities or the people in charge had known about it, they would have frowned on it. But a place that's vibrant like that and trying to push on and get the job done, if the last word got out a wee bit early, and the next word, there was a system that could wrap the pipes, and it vibrated up through the whole building, and the next word knew to come, and it might save 2 minutes. And the logistics of this, getting 500 people on this side and 500 on that side served, and within 3/4 of an hour or an hour, it wasn't like clockwork, and there was all sorts of systems developed to facilitate this. But I suppose it was fast and people were working hard. But my memory, when we're talking about them, was of good food for staff and patients.
But there was some very amusing, Brian here would know it as well as me, there was some great characters there. And there was one particular character who went there in the early years, and when a new patient would come in, he would ask him about someone that had been probably a fairly old man when he left, but he still thought he was doing the same job, and he still thought he was living, and he'd be asking him questions: is such a man still working on the stone bracker, or and he would even quote from his young days some of the experiences he had going to sports, and he'd be telling what the prizes were at the sports days, and the prizes could have been something like a pair of bicycle clips, or some other very simple, but this would have been the prize maybe for the boys' race. So there was some terrific characters among them, and I do know that there was I know one chap. You got onto all the tricks when you're there. Those enclosed yards you would see from the wards in the main building. And I know one particular boy, there was only one opening. The windows were narrow, and there was only one opening at the top. But what he used to do, he used to throw a shoe out of the window into the yard, and then he'd call a nurse, and he says, "Do you see the on shoe?" And the whole thing was an excuse for him to get down. Well, I'll go down for it. So.
There was a character in one of the wards one time. They were when they were out for their walk. They used to go out a whole ward, 60 or 70 people go out for a walk at the one time, and all the staff. But on the way back through the farmyard, they stopped in the pig raising and were looking, and one of the staff happened to remark that there was newly born litter of pigs, and he says, "God, wouldn't you love one of them for a pet?" The wee pig was running about. So they were all safely back in the ward again, and they getting ready to go for supper in the evening when this squeaking started through the ward, and this particular patient had brought one of the pigs with him as a present for this man that liked it for a pet. And he said, "There's your pet." And it got away, it was squealing through the ward, a wee pig. So the farmyard was, I'm told that it never really contributed all that much to the cost of running the place. They did produce their own potatoes, their own vegetables at a stage, and their own milk. Did they produce their own? Did they use the milk?
They did. They produced their own.
Yeah, they produced their own milk.
Then pasteurisation or something.
Whenever pasteurisation came in, they had to sell it and buy it in. But at the same time, it never went anywhere near meeting the cost of running the establishment.
I want to tell you about in the late 1960s. They decided they would build villas, and they built 8 villas across the river. And the patients over the years had been going out to those fields to gather potatoes. And in fact, actually myself, I was out with them one time digging potatoes. And also on the site of where the electricity board is now, I remember we were out working at hay there. I remember those rocks of hay going up in all directions. But to get back to the villas, then they decided before they built the villas, they spent a very long period, officials from the ministry coming to bore holes to find the soil. And all these well-informed people were coming, but the patients were asking them what they were going to do, and the patients said they were going to build new wards. The patients were telling some of the older patients, "Don't build it there. Don't build it in that field," he says, "for it will be flooded." And of course, they knew more than the patients. They went on boring and drilling, and finally, the field that they decided to build it, before they got the villas up, the flood came, and all the villas were all flooded.
Flooded to some level.
To some level, and they had a digger on the site. They had a digger on the site, and all was sticking out of the water was the exhaust pipe. So the patients,
They worked the fields.
they worked the fields, and they were in all those fields working at hay, and they did know the lie of the land.
Now, maybe this was a simplistic way of putting it, but at one stage, my view was that people with mental health problems in the community, there was a terrible stigma attached to it. So a family tried to disguise the fact, and they would keep them at home, or keep them, and didn't publicise the fact or seek help early enough, until they became very disturbed. And then they were brought to hospital when they couldn't contain no longer, when they did some, because of their the way they were feeling, did some harm, either to the family, to themselves, or to someone else. They were brought to hospital. And quite often then, that was the beginning, they were left there. They weren't, and later years, from 1960 on, the notion was creeping in of earlier treatment and hospital for a while and home again.
Well, looking back, have you seen that change in the public's attitude? And that would include the families of patients towards mental illness.
There has been a great effort put in on that front to contact families. They've been brought in all along the way. Families have been, people, members of families who haven't been home for 20 years have been taken out and left with their family for an afternoon to reassure them. Quite often their memory is of a young, strong fellow who became quite violent at times. Is now nothing like that. He's a quiescent. And so a lot of contact with families was re-established, and they were brought into the system. They were brought into the support system, and that didn't always work, but it worked in a lot of cases, and that was the idea. And attitudes do change, but there's some people, I mean, there's certain parts of the country where schizophrenia is like the swear word, and nobody's family has ever had one in their midst, or not, they don't even have just knuckles who become depressed.
The other thing, Brian, too, was that you had to change people out in the community, their attitude towards psychiatric illness. And I can remember at the start of this rehabilitation program that Brian saw, getting them into jobs, a group of nurses went out around business people in the main towns in Fermanagh and the main towns in County Tyrone, and talked to heads of garages and shops and factories, and asked them, was there any small tasks or some type of task that might be suitable to our patients that we considered had been through a rehabilitation program within the hospital, and we wanted to try them out in the community. And the people were very considerate, and quite a number of them offered work, and we did send patients out into work. Now, not all of them were able to stay in the job, but some of them did do very well, and some of them stayed for a period of time. But it was really the first step in rehabilitating people who had been for a long number of years in the Tyrone Fermanagh Hospital, to get them back out into public life.
I had a great life, a great working life. I didn't like it, thought it very strange when I first went there, but I enjoyed the company, I enjoyed the patients and staff that I met. I learned a lot from both. Things change and move on. It was a great place to work, and but just because I liked the place to work, it would be wrong to say that it should continue in the same format. The move to community care, properly funded and properly carried out, as coming towards the 21st century preference.
From dark till daylight, I spend with people of high renown. But but in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.